Good evening. I call the special meeting of the Ames City Council for Tuesday, February 20th to order. Welcome, everybody. We have a couple of business items first before we get into our workshop. So item number one, resolution approving inquiries from Ames Main Street for a waiver of enforcement of 4-hour parking limits in lots X, Y, and Z for Main Street, Iowa workshop on March 5th and 6th. Council, you have a council action form. Is there any questions for staff on this item? Hearing now, is there a motion?
I'd move alternative one.
Second.
Thank you. That being approval of the request. All right, roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Go ahead and start.
Aye.
Aye.
Are you able to get Amber, Susan?
Just mark her as a no.
No. Amber, can you hear us?
We'll just have to move on. All right, move on to item number 2, hearing on Fitch Family Indoor Aquatic Center bid package 03-3, precast concrete and structural steel. Keith?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and City Council. All the information is in the council action form, but if you remember, when we put out bids the first time, we received them on January 11th. There was one bid for precast concrete and steel we rejected all the bids and we rebid it. We got those bids back on February 15th. First time we had 5 bidders. This time we have 4, 2 of the same bidders and then 2 new ones. Low bid was the same on both of them, Core Construction Services. This one was an amount of $2,710,000, which is $288,000 than their bid the first go round. So it is higher. Did put some information in here in regards to all of the bid packages. The total of the construction now is $18,901,146. And when we look at the total project cost with that number in there, we're at $29,107,118. So, with it, it is a higher dollar amount, but it is critical that we move forward with the precast steel or precast concrete and steel, just from a project standpoint. So staff's recommendation, the city manager's recommendation is to award the contract for the base bid and alternate one, which is the walking area and the multipurpose rooms for the $2,710,000, and there's really 3 components that are listed in there: accept report of bids, approve the final plans and specs, and then award the contract. Do have Troy and Brandt from Story Construction here and Brad from RDG if there are any specific questions for either of them.
Any questions? All right, I declare the public hearing on the Fitch Family Indoor Aquatic Center bid package 03-3 precast concrete and structural steel to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this particular item? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Keith, you mentioned on February 27th, the staff will be presenting council several items they consider adding. Is this basically some scope increases that you're considering?
Yeah, like we mentioned last time when council directed staff to take a look at this, one of them will come back with you for a price on solar, putting solar on the roof. And then there's a couple of other things, benches in the multipurpose room, some tile lines in the lap pool rather than painting, which should help eliminate some of our maintenance. And then there's a couple of other things. But yeah, we'll bring those, and then we'll bring to you also about how to maybe fund those, potentially either using some of the savings that we have or possibly even just using the contingency Because right now we have a $2.1 million contingency, which is better than 10%. And generally at this point, 5% contingency is what owners carry. So I think there are some options for council to consider when we're looking at those, but we'll bring those next week.
You'll bring the numbers or just going to bring the scope of work?
No, it would just be the generally what we're thinking, and then some cost estimates.
Yeah.
There's been no plans or anything done. It's just more in concept to give you an idea of some things that we think could be added.
Thank you. All right. Entertain a motion accepting reported bids.
So moved. Second.
Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? And entertain a motion on resolution approving final plans and specifications, awarding the contract to Core Construction Services LLC of Des Moines, Iowa for both the base bid and alternate number one for a total contract amount $2,710,000.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank
Thanks,
you.
Keith.
Have a good evening.
All right. Move on to item number 3, workshop 2024-2029 CDBG home 5-year consolidated plan. I'll turn it over to our master of ceremonies, Vanessa.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present our 24-29 5-year consolidated plan. This is our public forum session, and believe it or not, it's 5 years already since our last CDBG program plan. So tonight, we're going to be presenting information about the plan, also some data that we working with Iowa State University that has to go as part of our consolidated plan. And then we're going to do some workshops and participate with the audience regarding getting our goals and priorities. So we're going to go over a basic overview of our CDBG and home programs just for people who are not familiar with it. And then we're going to review the data from our community surveys and from HUD that's required as part of this plan. And then we're going to review the consolidated plan requirements. We're going to look at our 5-year goals that we were created back in 2004, 2009, 2014, and 2019. They're also on our back wall here for people who want to take a closer look at this. And then we're going to do the breakouts with the small group discussions for people here so that we can establish our new 5-year goals and priorities for 24 to 29. And then we'll come back and then we'll talk about our tentative steps. Also, for the public and the audience, we will put these PowerPoints out on our website by the end of the week. So if people want to go back through them again, the PowerPoint presentations will be on our website at the housing, WW Housing City of Ames. Okay, so again, basic overview. The CDBG program is part of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. It's a formula grant, and Congress appropriates the funds to states and localities called entitlements or grantees, which we are. And it's one of the largest running programs administered by HUD. And the formula that they utilize is supposed to be looking at the inadequacies of the housing supply, incidents of poverty, physical distress, and other factors in each community. And we became an entitlement community back in 2004, and we met the threshold of having a population of over 50,000. That's one of the thresholds that you'd have to meet to become an entitlement. So the purpose of the program for CDBG is to provide decent housing, a suitable living environment, expand economic opportunities, principally for low and very low income persons. So CDBG has always been an important tool to help us tackle our serious challenges that we face in our community. And we have a lot of wording tonight that we're going to go through very quickly. That's why we're going to put the PowerPoint out on our website. So if I run through fast, that's why. Okay, there's 3 national objectives. There will be a test about this part at the end. And there will be a drawing for whoever gets the right answer. So the national objectives is that it has to be a benefit for low and moderate income, and it can be an area benefit, a housing benefit, limited clientele, or jobs. Limited clientele means like homeless or seniors. It's a limited population of people that meet that criteria. And then, of course, you can use it for slum and blight. You can do an area basis, spot basis. Of course, urban renewal in our community doesn't exist, but that's one of the areas you can use it under. And you can also use it for urgent need. Now, since we've been in entitlement since 2004, we have used the whole gambit of the 3 national objectives. Urgent need, when we had the flooding down on South Riverside, South Russell, we use our CDBG programs for that. And we continually are using them for slum and blight, as you well know. And then we also use it for low and moderate income to help low income families with deposit assistance, transportation assistance, all those things. So we've used the gamut of the national objectives with our CDBG funds. Again, low and moderate income is the most important of the 3 national objectives because it's the primary objective of the CDBG program. And at least 70% of all of our funds over a 1 to 3 year period must support activities that support LMI objective. The housing objective is the only LMI objective based on household assistance. So when we do an individual program, they have to qualify for the program. We have to determine them eligible. It's just not a emergency assistance program. Everyone who receives funds has to qualify. So that's the difference between that and getting emergency assistance. And then HUD determines the income limits, and they cannot exceed 80% of our metropolitan statistical area, and those income limits are determined by HUD. Also, CDBG can be used for housing, public facilities, public services, and economic development. We've rarely used our funds for economic development, but we have used them consistently for housing, public facilities, and/or public services. Also, it has some funding caps. We're limited to 20% of the funds for planning and administration, and 15% of the public service activities are restricted. So when we do deposit or first month's rent, those are considered public service activities. So only 15% of our funds can be used for that. And then you can use it for various special economic development activities. So that kind of talks about a broad overview of what our CDBG program is. And our next program is our home program. We became a home entitlement back in 2018. Remember, that was a surprise, but it worked out. It's also a formula grant, and under the jurisdiction, Congress calls us participating jurisdictions, or PJs, in addition, separate from entitlements under CDBG. Again, it is one of the largest federal programs designed to exclusively for affordable housing for low-income households. I think the biggest difference is we can use our home funds to create housing, where CDBG, we cannot use it to actually build housing. Again, home focuses on low-income households. 100% of the home dollars can help people at 80% or less. And then they have some restrictions on as far as using it for tenant-based rental assistance at 90%, and 60% of the median income can be households. And there's a project rule that 20% of the units have to be at 50% or below the median income if you're going to create that, which we are doing that this year, as we'll talk about later. Also, it has 4 components you can use it for. You can use it for homeowner rehab, home buyer new construction or down payment, rental development, new construction or rehab, and you can also use it for tenant-based subsidy. It's called TBRA, and it's very similar to Section 8, but it's for a more restricted time frame than the Section 8 program. Also, some other eligible costs, you can use it for hard costs, acquisition, demolition, relocation, refinancing. So it has a variety of uses that you can use under the home program. Home is distinguishes itself between units that have been assisted with home funds and those who have not. Homes allow funds to be spent on mixed income projects where CDBG is specifically listed for LMI under 80% or less. Home requires affordability period. So when we do loan out money, it's going to have affordability period based on the amount of funds that you're utilizing. Like if we were to utilize it for down payment assistance, we could have a 20-year affordability period. If we use it for construction, you can have a 30-year affordability period. It all depends on the amount of dollars that you put in, determines the affordability period. And like with CDBG, home allows us to have administration costs. We're capped at 10% of the grant funds, and some of the costs can be used under project delivery, but we're capped at 10%. The difference between CDBG and home is we get to roll over our home admin money if we don't use it, where CDBG use it or lose it for that year. Also, different than CDBG, home requires a 25% match. And it has to be a permanent contribution. And we have been using our GO bonds as our match for our home dollars as we have done the projects out in the Baker subdivision. And so some similarities between home and CDBG is the benefits are good. It helps us stretch our dollars, and each program can address each other activities that one can address activities that the other one cannot. But when you combine them together and using them for one program, it's going to be the most restrictive rules that apply, and home is more restrictive to use than CDBG. So also just to give the audience an idea of what the income limits are for 2023, again, HUD sets the income limits, and I kind of highlighted at the 80, 60, 50, and 30% for a family size of 4. It tells you what the gross maximum income limit can be for those particular households. It also tells us what our median income for 2023 was $121,600 compared to the United States, which is $67,521. So we're quite a big gap between our median income and that for the United States. And again, these change once a year. And so these are will probably likely change in June of 2024. A big component of the CDBG program and home program, of course, is citizen participation. And so that's why we're gathering here tonight and having public forums, because we definitely want the feedback of the public on how our dollars are being used and how we can use our dollars. And we also have to identify how we address the needs of non-speaking residents that are in our community, and how we'll address that. And we'll talk about that more in detail tonight as well. So there's a lot of other federal requirements, and I just listed a few that impact how we can administer programs. A lot of people might think that because you get a lot of money, you can just administer it, but it comes with a lot of guidelines that we have to also follow, especially when it comes to fair housing, or when it comes to environmental review, or lead paint, or all of those kind of criteria affects everything that we do on a project. Okay, again, I think I talked about that. I think I went the wrong way. Right. So that's kind of the overview of our CDBG and home program. And next, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go over the community and HUD data that was done by Iowa State. Nora and Amy are here tonight to kind of talk about the data. The data is what we use to determine what the needs are that comes from us and HUD. So I'm going to switch that out right quick for them. So, okay, I'm having some technical difficulties. Just 1 second. I can't get it to switch on the screen. Help. It won't. Okay, go back that way. I can do it this way. Okay, great.
It's okay. We just use the
Got it. I just have to hit a different button. Sorry about that.
time.
Okay, so this is the data analysis that we're presenting that we've collected for the consolidated plan and for our impediment study. And so we're going to talk about the presentation, the review of the data, setting the stage, talking about all the input that we use for the program to determine the data that we must use for the consolidated plan. So the purpose of the consolidated plan, again, is to help us as a jurisdiction access affordable housing and community development needs by doing data-driven decisions. And the data is collected from us through a consolidated plan, through our unlimited English proficiency data, our fair housing impediments data, and components of the consolidated plan that's provided by HUD that determines our housing needs assessments and our market analysis. So setting the stage, we're going to go through the methodology and the data sources that we use for our discussion for tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to Nora.
Too small to go there. Probably if I go there, you won't see me. So I have to stay here. Okay. For our impediments and 5-year consolidated plan, we use the separate kinds of data surveys. We have the mail survey, online surveys, and the public forum. And also aside from that, we use the secondary data such as the CHAS or HUD Comprehensive Housing Affordability Strategy for 2016 and 2020. That's the latest that it's available. And also the U.S. Census American Community Survey, ACS, 2018-2022. We started updating the consolidated plan, the data for NA, but in September, they've released the new data. So we have to wait, and we found out that there are some differences. So we have to go all over again. Other data that we use are the City of Ames Housing Division's data, workforce data, and also the Iowa Workforce Development. These are just the data sets that we are using as of now just for the presentation. And for sure, we'll be using more when we do the final report. Limited proficiency. You have to go back to Vanessa.
Okay, one of our data sets was our limited English proficiency report. As the council may have recalled, this is more of an internal document, but we have to address how we're going to help people with limited English proficiency. So what we've decided to do this year is roll all of our data into the 5-year set. So we're going to update our limited English proficiency, our fair housing impediments, and our consolidated plan. So now they'll all be on the 5-year cycle. We used to do them in different parts of the year, but this year we're going to combine them into one. And so the limited English proficiency report is to comply with federal regulations, the executive orders, that the city must take reasonable steps to ensure meaningful access to our programs and activities by persons with limited English proficiency. And so we looked at the data that they included in their what they call the safe harbor provision. And according with the safe harbor provision for limited LEP persons, cities must translate documents for groups that are at least 5% of the eligible population or 1,000 persons or whichever is less. If it's less than 50 in a language group that reaches that 5% trigger, cities are not required to translate the vital documents, but should provide written notice in a primary language for a LEP group. and to the writer that received oral interpretation, written materials, all of those things free of cost. So based on the data from the American Community Survey from 2022 for the 5-year estimate, by those who speak English with populations 5 years or over, the total population over speak English very well is only 0.69%. This means that the city does not have the threshold to develop a specific language policy for that threshold. However, our Spanish-speaking group has 43% who speak English less than very well. There's also 5% of the Asian Pacific Island language speakers who speak English less than very well. So based on the safe harbor data, the city must translate written documents for these groups because they are 5% of the eligible population, or 1,000. So this is something that we've been working on every year, and I think SIRIDE has to do the same. I think they reach their thresholds before us because their data comes from the DOT. Now ours come from HUD. But as you can see, we now will have to start creating translations of programs for people who speak Spanish and for people who speak Asian specific language. So we'll be working on that as part of updating our plan and how we're going to go about translating our documents. I know right now that you can go on our website and pick a language, but we're now going to be doing a more targeted language interpretation for all of our city employees because HUD doesn't just cover our CDBG program, it's everybody who walks in the door has to be able to have access to language in their native tongue. And so we'll be working on that language plan and be rolling that out to council for adoption as we move forward as part of our consolidated plan. Any questions about that? I know it's not surprising. Our numbers have been increasing a lot. So now we finally have met that threshold.
One question. So on the Asian Pacific Island language, do we know if that's going to be Mandarin or a different language or a combination of them?
The ACS did not specify what languages those are.
Okay.
So I think what we could do is probably from other sources. We know how many of what are those people. I mean, the ethnic backgrounds of all those people, and then we could probably determine from there.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
It's so general.
it's very general. So, we have some translation things in place. We'll just have to see from people who come in or people we can survey, if there's some specific language we should bring to the top compared to others.
Mhm.
But no, it doesn't give us a specific threshold. Thank you. Okay, so now it's up to you.
Okay. Now what I'm going to talk about is the impediments to fair housing survey that we did in September. And then the reason why we're doing this is to identify the impediments or barriers in securing safe, decent, and affordable housing within the city of Ames. And basically, it's an update of the 2019 Fair Housing Choice as part of the CDBG program entitlement program. So all of the questions that all of the questions in the survey in 2019, we use it again in 2023 to see whether there are some changes or differences. For 2023-24, we surveyed 9 groups of people. Basically, it's the housing producer or the provider and the housing consumers. And the housing producers are composed of realtors, low-income renter managers, developer, lender, housing service provider. And then for the housing consumers, we have general renters, subsidized housing renters, homeowners, and IHU student. We have some data from 2014 too, but in the 2014 IHU students were not included, but we were able to include it in 2019. So we included in the 2023. And the next column is a description of what are included in those groups. This is the method of how we gather the data. It's a combination of online survey for almost all of them, except for the subsidized housing renters wherein we mail the survey. For the online survey, what we did is we send out postcards to each one of them, and we put them the link and how to fill up the form. And the link was shortened in such a way that it will be easy for them to write rather than copying it then. In terms of sources of the respondents, for the housing producers, we got it from a list from Vanessa, and some of them from for example, the realtors were able to ask the realtor, what is that? Central, Iowa Regional something. And they were able to send it to their list. So we're hoping that we will be able to get some. For the housing consumers, general renters came from the city and also the subsidized housing renters and homeowners. For the ISU students, I got the list from the Iowa State registrar, and we do a randomly sampling for most of them. Since there are a lot of population size for each one of them, I did a random sampling because we cannot send the postcards to everybody, or even send all the the link to the survey to everybody is just too much. Another way that we'll be having is the two public forum, which one of them will be held today. This is the comparison of the response rate from 2014, 2019, and 2023-24. You could see here in 2014, the response rate was 23%, went down to 16% in 2019, and then it went down again to 12%. Unfortunately, we didn't have anybody who responded among the developers. The survey was intended to be there for 3 weeks, but I opened it up until December to give them more time to do it. We did a follow-up for everybody who have email addresses and anybody that we could contact. But this is how far we could go. In terms of the validity of the data, I did some computations in terms of what is the margin of error with what we have. Right now, in order for us to have a valid sample size for the whole population from producers, provider, plus all the consumers, we just need 400. Wait. What's this? We just lacking 40 completed surveys in order to be 95% confidence level and 5% of margin of error, which is not too far if you look at the whole population, but individually, our response rate are quite low. And we just don't know what are the best way to contact them. We really did our best to get more response rates. This is the sample of the postcard that we sent out. And we have different sets of this because it's customized for which group we are sending it to. Summary of the impediments of fair housing survey. There are 2 items that the questions are quite long, not really long. Probably you could finish the survey within 15 to 20 minutes. But the one that I'm going to present are just 2 important issues from the survey itself. It's the important factors for the renters and the homeowners, and what are the housing barriers that still exist in the city of Ames, comparing it with the 2019. So those are the two issues that I'm going to discuss. This is just to show you the methodology of how I came up, whether that factor is an important factor or that factor is a barrier to be considered really a housing barrier for the city. On a scale of 1 to 5, we have several items that we ask them, and out of that, one being strongly disagree, 3 is neutral, and 5 is strongly agree. So when I did the mean value for each one of them, anybody who has an average more of 3.5 and over, it is considered a housing barrier or an important factor. For the 2023, the important factors when considering renting, our respondents here are the consumers, which are the general renters. We have 11 of them, subsidized renters 82, and Irish students 143. The first important factors for them when they're renting is the cost of housing. It's always the first on the 3 groups of consumers. Overall condition is the second one for all the 3 groups. Location is second for general renter, and third for the subsidized renter and ISU student. The asterisks that you have in there are those where it didn't meet the 3.5 threshold, but the questions are all asked to everybody. This is the one where important factors in purchasing a house. And our respondents here are the homeowners. For homeowners, the cost of housing is the first important factor for them. Location and interest rate are second, and overall condition is third. And fourth, fifth, and sixth, this one have a 3.5 value, but those are just the ranking. This is the second issue that we look at the survey. The housing barriers as perceived by renters and homeowners. In this graph, you see that the orange one, the arrow one, is the housing barrier, which is 3.5. Anything above that is considered a housing barrier, and below that it's not. The bar chart refers to 2023 data, and the line chart refers to 2029, which is in purple 2019, which is the purple color. From here, you could see that cost of housing, lack of available decent units in affordable price ranges, and excessive rental deposits are the housing barriers perceived by general renters. The ones that did not go through the threshold of 3.5 are cost of utilities, excessive application fees, negative attitudes of landlords, lack of knowledge of how to file a housing complaint, and employment opportunity. And I have this graph for each of the housing consumers. So this is just for the general renters. For the subsidized renters, again, 3.5 is a threshold on a scale of 1 to 5. Only 2 items did not reach the threshold of 3.5. The subsidized renters do not consider employment opportunity and negative attitude of landlords as housing barriers. However, the excessive rental deposits, lack of available decent units in affordable price ranges, excessive application fees, cost housing, and lack of knowledge of how to file a fair housing complaint and cost of utilities are considered housing barriers. for 2023. But if you look at the 2019, the trend is quite different. For lack of available decent units, housing in affordable ranges, you see that it's 3.7 for 2023, but it's higher in 2019. So it's still, I mean, the trend is almost the same, but the values are different. This is the housing barriers as perceived by ISU students. Again, the blue one is for the 2023, purple is 2019, and threshold of 3.5. You could see here that there are only three items that are perceived as housing barriers by the students. The first one is cost of housing. Second one is lack of available decent units in affordable price ranges. And the third one is excessive rental deposits. This is the summary of the housing barriers are as perceived by consumers, which are the general renters, subsidized renters, IU students, comparing 2014 with 2019 and 2023. Since we have a good data for 2019 and 2023, we just want to know whether it really changed or not. Cost of housing is consistently the first housing barrier as perceived by general renter. And it's the same with the subsidized renter. The first one for them is the lack of available decent units in affordable price ranges. For the students, we don't have data for 2014. The first one is cost of housing for both 2019 and 2023. And the second one is lack of available decent units in affordable price ranges. For the third one, excessive rental, for subsidized renter, it's the excessive rental deposits, and also with the IUC students. For the general renter, the cost of utilities is the third one, which is quite new. This is the first time that it appeared as a higher value compared with the other years. Again, the asterisk means that the responses didn't meet the 3.5 threshold. It was it was asked, but it wasn't considered as a housing barrier.
And we think that
Yes.
that's because when you look at the subsidized renter, if they're receiving subsidy to help to pay their rent, then the cost of housing is not affected. That's why it's like fourth for 2023. But the deposit ranked high and the excessive rental deposit ranked high. So it kind of makes sense that if they're getting help with their rent, that's fourth compared to deposits and finding affordable housing. So
Everything seems pretty subjective except for, was there a definition on what a decent unit was in the survey?
No, unfortunately not.
That becomes a very objective.
Yeah, it's how
subjective.
how they've interpreted it.
Because someone might think that one unit is okay, and someone else might think it's very acceptable. I mean, not okay. So it makes it a little harder to me to. Anyway, thank you.
Vanessa, can you tell us what the application fees are? Where do those go? I don't know what they are applying, who they are applying to.
Oh, when they go
When
to
they're
rent
renting?
an apartment, they have an application fee
Oh.
that's being charged.
Huh.
And some of them are pretty high and they're non-refundable. And so even if they got or didn't get chosen, they don't get their application fee back. And they're pretty significant.
Checking references.
Background
Checks.
checks or just processing the application. There's an application fee. Yeah. They can run from anywhere from $30 to $60 or more. Some people saying, I need help being able to apply because I can't afford the application fee.
Are the general renters and the ISU students also paying these fees?
Yeah.
But they just don't perceive them as any kind of
a
barrier. Okay.
Right, because they have access to maybe other kinds of funds where
Mhm.
the subsidized renter does not. So kind of makes sense in a way when you think about those kind of barriers. So we just thought that was interesting compared to over the years that the renters' housing choice went forth, but that's because they're getting subsidy.
And can you remind us of the number of subsidized, again, that were in the survey? The number?
We surveyed 82 of the subsidized renters.
Two responded back.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. This is the housing barriers as perceived by homeowners, comparing 2019 with 2023. You could see here that cost of housing is the only housing barrier that was considered by homeowners, and the rest just have low values. Again, I'm just comparing it with 2014, 19, and 23. Again, it's the first. When you rank it, it's always the first one, the cost of housing. Now, this is housing barriers as perceived by housing producer or provider for home ownership and for renter. So this is the housing producers talking about what do they think are the housing barriers for renting, what are the housing barriers for homeowners. In this graph, we could see here that for perception of the housing provider or producers, summing up all the respondents among the producers, we have only two items that they think are not housing barrier for the renters, and that is excessive application fees or close or deposits and lack of adequate public transportation. And the rest they think are all housing barriers. If you see here, just like the three highest one, which has a score of 4.5 on a scale of 1 to 5, lack of knowledge of how to file a fair housing complaint, lack of knowledge of fair housing rights, and restrictive zoning building codes.
So,
And we don't have any definition of those on the survey. Those are the actual wordings that we use.
so can you help us understand? This is the perception of what a housing barrier would be for somebody who wants
To rent.
to rent. So they believe that the lack of
No,
sorry, Connie.
yeah.
Service provider. I think it's almost comical. I mean, like, or not comical. I shouldn't laugh, but like that they're saying that, oh, it's all the, it's zoning codes and building codes. It's not cost and location.
Yeah, I'm just trying.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to tease out what this is really telling us. So it's really
Okay.
it's their perception of what somebody else is thinking
Yes.
is a barrier. Is that
Correct.
right?
What they
Have
think
cost
are
of
the
housing.
barriers for the renters.
Yes. It's the housing producer saying, here's what they think the barriers are for their renters.
Okay.
Mhm. It's quite opposite.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and Rachel just noted that there's nothing. Go ahead.
So cost of housing isn't even a category on here for a bar. How did we determine these categories to put in the survey?
These are the same questions that we used in 2019.
Okay.
But wouldn't that, to your point, wouldn't that be
Wasn't-
they've identified? I mean, the renters have identified, and the homeowners. It's cost of housing, cost of housing, cost of housing. So why wouldn't that be a question that would be posed to the housing providers? I'm just kidding.
I think it was on
I
there.
think it was
It
there.
just didn't.
Cost of housing was on there. It just didn't get there.
So you're saying it was less than 1.5? Is that
Mhm.
why it didn't make the list?
Yeah, I mean, for
For
the lack
cost.
of adequate public transportation. That's in terms of agreement of whether they think lack of adequate public transportation is a housing barrier
No.
for the renters. What is that?
Is it cost of housing on the line?
Right,
The cost of housing.
Oh, the cost of housing.
right. Like, was that not an option for them to choose on the survey?
I thought it was there.
And maybe it just didn't.
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
We can
Yeah,
double
we could-
check.
I could
We
double
can
check.
double
That would be
check based on the
I
good.
think
survey.
we,
That's a good
we
point.
included that.
Well, it could also be that they're thinking that the restrictive zoning and building codes are creating expensive units. And therefore, that's cost of housing, but it's translated into why we have to charge you so much.
Right.
Yeah, I still think there's a glaring error here. I mean, this should be something that they should be, if they just say it's not even 1.5, there's a real disconnect in terms of what is really truly a barrier as perceived by people who are renting and those who are actually doing the renting.
And excessive application fees is like below the line. They're like, no, those are
Well,
fine.
Renters say that there's a barrier.
Okay,
Yeah.
We'll check on that one. And
thank you.
Thank you.
And we didn't
Better.
get a big response rate either, so.
Oh, yeah. How many was that in terms of?
11 or something?
Yeah.
Or 30
That's a good
something.
question. Yeah.
no, that's for.
It was pretty low.
Yeah, it was. I think it
I,
was.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, do we benchmark our data against any other data? I mean, some of these are fairly intuitive that I would expect tenants to be concerned about the price and so on. I mean, is this fairly consistent with what you're seeing on a statewide basis or even nationally?
And this one and this question, we didn't even compare it with other.
So I understand we're
areas.
trying to,
Not yet. We will, yeah.
so I understand the
eventually.
goal of
Probably.
of trying to understand our particular market, but I was just curious, we're going to a lot of work on surveying information that some of it is a little bit intuitive that we can sort of anticipate the kinds of barriers that people will find. But I was just curious if we compared it all with any kind of state or national benchmarks.
We will as we
Yeah.
get more into doing the consolidated plan. Right now, this is just what we've done so that we can have further discussion to create the other elements of the consolidated.
Okay, cool, thanks.
The end for this one is 45.
45.
Yeah.
Okay, this is now the barriers perceived by housing producers for homeowners. Cost of housing is here. So
But
we
it
could
is
see
meeting
there
threshold.
that for this year, nothing, I mean, there's no perceived housing barriers for homeowners as perceived by the producers or providers.
Were you surprised by the change from 2019 to 2023, especially in these categories? That seems
Yeah,
pretty
we're-
stark.
Yeah, we're just wondering how come. I mean, the thing is, it depends on who really answered it.
Mm-hmm.
And we did not get the response from this
This-
side as
Uh-huh.
we would have liked. I mean, we're
Yes.
disappointed in the number of people who filled out the survey, and we sent out
Mhm.
all to the Central Iowa Board of Realtors listing, and we got a very, very, very low response rate.
Yeah,
For-
2019, you had quite a bit more
Quite a bit.
response.
Mhm.
We have 96 respondents in 2019 and this group. And for this year, we have only 45.
Less than half.
And there is one group wherein we didn't even get anything.
Right.
So,
Right.
It's interesting to me that lack of knowledge in 2019 was rated very highly. And that seems to suggest to me that the housing producers are perhaps saying, you just don't know how to work the system right in order to get the costs down, which seems like
Mm-hmm.
an odd assumption to make. But I would say that the same seemed to be true for the renters, that the assumption was you don't understand how to use the system.
Well, I think, I'm not sure I agree with that. Troy, I think they're actually, it's gone down. They believe that there's actually an increasing, they say the lack of
No,
knowledge. Is that
I
right?
I said 2019, not
2019.
2023.
Correct. But it's improving though.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently it's improving, or the perception is
They,
it's improving.
they think it's not a barrier.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
no
Yeah.
longer a barrier.
Right.
So I would offer this, this chart doesn't have anything about, and maybe I'm missing it, but the lack of access. I mean, there weren't very many houses. We had the lowest number of houses available to purchase last year in decades. And so I don't know how that's not a factor. I mean, it's sort of baked into the cost of housing. So because there were fewer houses for sale in Ames, that then impacted the price of the house. So in some ways that's baked in. But that's certainly one of the variables, particularly on starter houses, those lower houses. And so it seems like that should be something, as we think about future surveys, you'd want to have some kind of inquiry about the available choices that people have.
Okay.
Okay. This is another item that we asked from the survey. It's about housing discrimination, and according to the data, it's not a major issue in Ames. There are only 11 people among the subsidized renters who felt discriminated. 2 from renters, 1 from homeowner, and 1 from ISU students. And when we asked them whether they filed discrimination complaint, only 2 persons said yes, and only 1 said that they contacted HUD. Transportation access. There's now no problem with reasonable access in terms of distance to public transportation, and they were frequent enough that it's not a problem. So public transportation is okay in the city. And this is just a conclusion of what I just presented. Cost of housing is the first barrier for both renters and homeowners. It is ranked first by housing burden for general renters, ISU students, and homeowners. It is ranked 4th by subsidized renter. For homeowners, the cost of housing is the only important barrier. The second one is availability of affordable housing for the renters. It is ranked 2nd by house for both general renters and ISU students, and 1st by subsidized renters. This is the same trend in 2014 and 2019. The third one is the excessive rental deposit, as ranked by 2nd by subsidized renters and 3rd by ISU students. Cost of utilities was ranked 3rd housing burden by general renters. And that's it.
I just have one overarching question for you, and that is, you said that you were short 40 respondents in order to have a 95% accuracy.
Mhm.
So what are the implications, and how will the federal government, HUD, Home, CDBG, view the survey results if you don't hit a 95% accuracy?
I have the 95% confidence level, and I think the margin of error with the one that was completed was 5 instead of 5%. That's the goal, is to have just a 5% margin of error. What we have was, I think, 7%.
So just as long as
It's not, yeah.
it's not something that you have concerns that Vanessa.
It's still
HUD, or-
it's still valid. I mean, it's still generalized from it, But I just hope that we just always get the 5%
Sure.
margin of error.
You made a point to mention, I just want to make sure that we understood what the implications may or may not be, and it sounds like it's not.
If it is not, yeah, it's not too far from
Thank you.
what we're aiming for.
And as you see in this next section, Mayor, the impediment study is from the community's
Mhm.
perception.
Mhm.
And so we always want to compare that perception with what HUD data shows us in the actual consolidated plan. And Nora's going to go over the consolidated plan data right now.
Amy.
Amy. And you'll see, I'll just let you see first.
All right, so this one?
Mhm.
Okay. So this is a summary of the 5-year consolidated housing plan that, as we've done it so far, there's still a lot more report to write, but we've got the basic data down. So as we've talked about, this is a document that's important for HUD to get our CDBG funds. And so the sources we use are the CHAZ data from 2016 to 2020, and then the American Community Survey data from the US Census Bureau. And that is from 2018 to 2022. And we'll be talking, households include disabled households are disabled persons living alone as the head of a household or the spouse of a head of a household. The elderly households are those that are 62 or older, and they have either they qualify, or well, one of the 3 situations in order to anyway, 62 and older.
Mhm.
And then family household. And in our household universe, students are considered in our household universe. And that's what we're saying here, basically, is that off-campus and on-campus housing students are in our household data. And we can't tease that out, so that might affect some of this.
Excuse me, did you say that on-campus housing is included in this?
Yes.
So the dormitory,
As long as there are IUC students.
interesting.
And this is, we've kind of gone over this, but these are just the classifications for different income groups. And the word cost burden that we're going to be using is spending 30% or more of your household income on housing. Housing, so the formulas that we're using for housing cost are from the CHAZ data, the American Community Survey data, and the home rent data. And then we're also looking at the availability of affordable housing based on the income level, the housing gap analysis, and census tract analysis.
So I apologize, just make sure we're on the same page.
Yes,
So students are included in this because in some
they are.
in some
Yes.
settings we have students included, in some they're not. In this one, they're included.
Yes.
And so let me channel my inner Peter Erasm.
Okay.
So how does this influence the results if we take half of our population are students roughly? And of course, they're going to be low income. They're students. And so how does that not strongly influence, distort the outcomes?
I mean, it does to some extent, but we also have, housing tracts that are like, I mean, obviously you can see where Campus Town is, and you can see where some of the other neighborhoods that maybe are more student, and it might trend a certain way. But I mean, there are other places in town that aren't as student focused, and So we'll get to it, but that is
Okay.
something to think about.
But that's, for me, that's a major factor in here. And it's, in some ways, it just, students play an important role because they're an important group of tenants. But what I'm trying to tease out, particularly, this is just me, I want to understand the challenges of our non-students as well as our students. And this is very difficult to sort of, if you're working a job and you're supporting a family, you have those pressures. I just see that as a different setting than someone who's an 18-year-old. And
Exactly.
it just seems different to me.
Yes.
So any help with that would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
The thing is that from the secondary sources of data, which is the actuals, the only source of data for this, it includes everybody.
Yeah, like
And
the
there's no
Census
way
Bureau
for us
doesn't.
the census just put them together, and there's no way for us to separate the non-student from.
And I appreciate that, but as policymakers,
Yeah, I know.
we have to put weight
Yes.
on outcomes. And if there's ways in which, because the students and their inclusion as low income into our population, that's going to press weight down on some of these variables that I think has a distorting effect on the outcome. So I understand you can't change that, but we're going to weight things differently. At least I think we should.
Yeah.
I would just caution you, Tim, and the rest of us, that while I think it does skew the information that we have, the students are also facing tremendous financial challenges. And I have some students who are working 3 jobs just to stay in school. So I don't think that we can assume that just because they're students, they don't face some of the same problems that families do. So I would hope that we would be seeing them as more similar to those families rather than less similar to them, because they are low income. They have a lower income for different reasons, but many of the students are struggling to make their rent. They're struggling to feed themselves. The food pantry on campus is blowing off the doors. So I want us to be cautious about putting the students in a completely different category from the other low and moderate income families.
Okay.
Okay, so the total number of households is 25,140. This includes 48% renters or 58% renters and 42% homeowners. And there's a vacancy rate for renters of 7.4 and 0.2. This is kind of what Tim was talking about for homeowners earlier when you were talking about how there isn't very much of a housing supply.
So how was that vacancy rate determined?
So the American Community Survey data is kind of an average over 5 years. And so I think the census somehow kind of does an average, and they move that every year or two. So it's kind of a moving average of the last 5 years of data.
And then again, this data comes from about our community from HUD. So this is what they give us. And when you talk about the fair impediment study, and that's from our own citizens, this is the data that comes to us from HUD. They're going to say, okay, we gave you this data. What are you going to do with it? But yet it's still behind. It's not current data that we can't get. So, I mean, this is 2022, or some of it is 2020, and they're behind in the data. So we're always chasing the data.
And I mean, it's not just our community, it's
It's all over.
nationwide. So everybody's using the same stuff. And then the percentage of households with one or more housing problems is 60% renters and 14% homeowners. 52% of households in Ames spent over 30% of their income on housing. And that's more than it was in the 2019 report. So it keeps going up. The major housing problems that we identified in the CHAZ data were the cost burden of 30 to 50%, which was 31% for renters and 57% for homeowners, and the housing cost burden of greater than 50% of the income for 57% of renters and 37% of owners. So that's a significant number. And it's again pointing to the cost of housing being an actual issue that that we saw in
We saw that
survey.
on our own survey side compared to what HUD's telling us. They kind of matched cost of burden of housing. So our own community recognizes it, and so does HUD in their data.
So this is, make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So we look at the cost burden. We have a tenant who is a student, full-time student, and we have a tenant who is fully employed in Ames. So this chart is going to treat them the same in terms of this. And so this is where it makes a difference. And I don't know how we can lump them all together. So we would expect as a percentage for a student who doesn't have any income or has a part-time job, of course, the rent is going to be more expensive than someone who has a full-time job. So this is where lumping the students in causes a distorting effect.
Well, it sounds like though is that they have no choice in the matter because it's really, they're downloading.
Understand.
it.
How
Yeah.
the data.
But
Well,
from a
and-
policy
but-
perspective, that we have to take that into account.
Well, you could look at the owner column and figure pretty safely that there aren't many students in that column. And then if you just use sort of, again, it's intuition, but that in general, renters are probably typically lower income than homeowners, you could assume that that rental column will be at least what the owner column is or more. You know what I'm saying?
No.
No.
Well, and even that students may take advantage of more creative ways of handling where they're living. And so where they might be willing to be in a unit with 3 or 4 other people, most folks who are working may not do that. And so the fact that they are still experiencing these challenges, even though they may take advantage of those other options, I think is important to think about. And also, even as we've talked with folks in student government, that there are a number of young people on campus that are homeless. And that is an issue that we want to think about and be concerned about as a city, in addition to thinking that that's something that the university would solve.
I think your points, I think I get your point, and we got to somehow tease it out in terms of be aware of it as we go through. So, go ahead.
So this is looking at the cost burden rental payments. So the median household rent in 2022 was $1,011. And that median monthly rent had increased by 15.4% from 2017, when it was $876, which is a significant amount of money, especially if you're renting. And then looking at that trend, if we go back to the 2012 data, rent was only $651. So, I mean, over the last 15 years, or not even, it's almost doubled, or I mean, it's gone up quite a bit.
So, a question about what a household is. There are 2 students living together in one unit. Is that one household or is that 2 households because there are 2 people?
Depends on how they fill out the
Sure.
data.
Yeah.
They count themselves as a household or 2 separate households.
Okay.
Oh, good question.
So it could
Yeah.
really depend.
That's good.
Just that's HUD collecting the data. And if each person got a separate form to fill out and they filled it out separately, then they're gonna count them separately.
Kelly's indicating that that's counted as one household in the stats.
Oh, it would. One house.
The census is measuring from a location basis, an address database. So they're measuring the result, the answers from an address, and that's going to count as one household, whether you're related or not.
Okay.
It's even more.
Thank you.
And just one more thing about this, the chart is showing that the little tiny bit is rent that's under $500. The yellow part is $500 to $999, and the rest, 51%, is over $1,000 in rent.
But they don't like survey this based on number of bedrooms or anything. There's no way to break that out.
There are some data in terms of number of bedrooms.
Because that could maybe help us get a better estimate of rent per person versus rent per unit that could be anywhere from studio to 5-bedroom.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so this is just looking at the vacancy status for the extremely low income. That's housing units that are affordable to people with 0 to 30% of the area median income. And so there were about 2,000 units that were available, and 150, which is about 7%, were vacant, and the rest were occupied. And the interesting thing is we were able to tease out kind of like who's occupying different rental units. And of that 2,000 plus units, 58% was being occupied by that group that could afford that. And the rest was different varying income levels. So it's just what it is. And then we were looking at the cost burden of owning a home. And we saw that 21% of homeowners, which is almost 1,500, had issues with housing cost. And the cost burden for purchasing a home, we used a household size of 3 for our family size, which we've done in the past. And that's a family of 3 earning $76,000. And so they could afford plus or minus $180,000 home. And if they had a better credit score, maybe $200,000. But the average sale price in the last 2 years, we have by the quarter. And as you can see, those numbers are not anywhere close to the numbers that that family would need for their house price cost. And this is kind of showing the housing gap by income level. So that means the number of housing units or rental units in this case that are available at different income levels. So
minus the total number of households.
okay, minus the total number of households. So there, in the lowest income level, there are we need 3,750 more housing units, but we have an excess in the 50 to 80,000, or I mean, 50% to 80% median family income. And then we you can see the other trends. So at the end, we have a total, we're pretty good on housing, on rental units, but there's a mismatch in the rental price. Is that good? And then looking at the homeowner units, we have enough housing units, but not in the highest income levels, I guess. And
We lack 5,191 for the higher income level group. That's what this one says. But we have more than enough for the other income categories.
I apologize.
sure.
I'm having trouble reconciling, and I'm sensitive to, I don't know, Mayor, how long you're wanting to allocate for this, so if we want to
How many
have,
more slides do you have to go through?
Yeah, we're almost at the end, so we can go to our roundtable.
yeah, I mean, real quickly, if you could I apologize, I'm not reconciling the prior slide with this slide. So in the prior slide, it looks like we
These are
have a
rental
deficit of housing, and then in the next slide, if you could go to the next slide.
It's not a deficit of housing, it's a deficit of housing at the right income levels. Like there's a mismatch for the people. So people in the 0 to 30, the extremely low income level, there's not enough housing for people to rent in that income
Okay,
level. But
so-
then in that next income group, there's an excess.
This is for rental units.
Right.
Next one is for home ownership,
Oh,
homeowner
okay,
units.
that's helpful, thank you.
So what I understand from this is that we have enough housing stock for up to 100%, but maybe it's not turning over enough because all the sale prices were way above, but we do have housing stock that would meet these income levels.
We have enough. If you look at the total, it's all positive. But the thing is that it's not being occupied by the right people in the right income category.
Okay.
Where there's just not enough in the lower, and obviously in this, it seems like there could be people in the higher that maybe aren't
Are
getting the
occupying
housing.
the lower.
Yeah. And this is just looking at the housing problems by census tract. And some of the ones that with asterisks, parts of them are outside of the Ames municipal boundary, which you'll see. And this map is showing the housing burden by census tract. The ones in darkest blue, track 7 and track 11.02 are the highest housing
Cost
burden.
Again, this refers to the cost burden, which is they're paying more than 30% of their household income.
Okay. And this is just showing where the low income housing tax credit developments are. And it's also showing areas that have the qualified census tracts for low income tax credits.
This is the census tract that HUD identifies as having low-income census tracts in Ames that also includes the low-income tax credits. So these are the census tracts that we concentrate on when we're doing public improvement projects. It can only be located in those census tracts because it's not by household, it's by census tracts. So you can see where some overlap, especially census tract 7 and census tract 13.04, which where we're doing a lot of concentration for housing as well as trying to do some other low-income census tracts that are identified by HUD in our community. And we've lost some tracts, and then some tracts they kind of split This is what HUD has identified as our low-income census tract.
And what percentage are those of those particular 7 and 1304 are students? What percentage?
I think that's something we could look up.
Well, we'd have to look that up.
You have to look.
Well, I can tell you, it's a very high percentage.
I know census tract
Yeah.
7 is University
Universities,
Village.
yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell you it's a very high percentage. So I'm saying, if we don't think that wrapping students into the low income category makes a difference, that chart is Exhibit
I
A.
didn't say it didn't make a difference. I
Okay.
said that we cannot completely separate the students off from other residents.
Well, this is where it makes a difference.
Well, but
It's
like
artificially-
11.02 is Campus Town, and that's not one of the low-income ones.
So five encompasses a lot of university housing as well.
Yeah.
So I was curious why that's included here.
This is from HUD.
This is the
Like,
HUD data for our census tracts.
Interesting. So it seems like they specifically took out all of the other Iowa State housing, but not in
It
five.
may be because those weren't considered group quarters for the census. Because I know that 8 and 12 were certainly group quarters census tracts, and I think maybe 11.02 was
Yeah,
as
that
well.
is Buchanan and Joffrey.
Okay.
do you want to go over this one?
I think we could just probably skip this.
Okay.
We just also looked at race and ethnic groups as HUD gave us the data to see if there was any disproportionate greater needs for that as far as African American, Hispanic, and Asian households at 30% or less. And also the need for severe housing problems compared to those. African Americans fall in the biggest track. And then greater need for housing burdens. We have both Hispanic and other households that fall in those house burden areas as identified by HUD. So that kind of gives you the data that we've created, HUD has created for us that we've put together to compare with the impediment study and looking at the HUD data. They are similar. Yes. Are they apples to apples, oranges to oranges? We just have what we have. This is the data that they're expecting us to put in our consolidated plan and to determine, what our needs are based on this data. And it does include students. So, and I think you're going to find that in most university towns that the data is going to look like that as well.
So we're going to appreciate everyone who's stayed for the last hour and a half and been enlightened like we have been on all the data. What's the next step? And we need to have some small group discussions. And
Yes.
what is the specific charge, first of all? Excuse me. And secondly, how long should we allow? And we've lost some participants. So what do you want? What do you recommend for a number of individuals per group so we can be effective?
There's like 14.
It's 13 or 14.
Well, I think we have enough where we can close down our circles and get maybe 2 circles and then have the council members have the conversation. Because we wanted to talk about what we think our goals and priorities are based on the data that we have that's provided by our survey and that's provided by HUD. And to see if there's any differences in the goals and priorities as we want to address them. Because we have to come up with our goals and priorities. Now, they can be the same goals and priorities that we currently have, which we know is about affordable housing. But again, it's a 5-year plan, so we just have to discuss what those goals and priorities, where we want to concentrate our CDBG funds for the next 5 years.
And
So-
Vanessa, could you just remind us, we haven't talked about the amount of money that's involved. Could you just give us a quick reminder of the ballpark of funds that would be applied in these programs?
Okay. Currently, we just received for 2023 just over $500,000 of community development block grant funds. And we received just over $320,000 of home dollars.
Okay, thank you.
We don't have our 24 allocation yet, So we don't know what those numbers are going to look like. We normally anticipate they're going to be similar to the 2023 numbers.
Right, thank you.
And Vanessa, I know that we have received a number of emails regarding something that council had discussed, which was, is there a way to use either CDBG money or home funds for assistance with retrofitting houses for the climate action plan implementation? And so I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong, that if we wanted to add that among these priorities, if the groups have that input, that would be from home funding, or is that something that crosses CDBG and home categories?
Well, it could cross either one, but what we're trying to do tonight is, before we get to our action plan projects, is to determine what our goals are for the categories of low income versus non-low income. And just for example, these were our goals for 2019 to 2024. Utilize CDBG and home funds, private, public, to create, sustain, and expand affordable housing for low-income households through increasing the supply of single-family or two-family home ownership in our neighborhood revitalization areas, reduce the cost burden for low-income households or to maintain rental housing units, and increase the affordability, quality, and availability of housing for homeowners citywide. So that's our current 5-year right now for what our goals are. And then from there, we derive what those projects would look like. Okay, so this is where we start first. We start with what we want the goals to be, and then we come back with you and say, here are projects that meet those goals for our action plan.
So I want to make sure that I understand where that climate action planning might fit. Does it fit with something that we currently have, or is that something that we would be considering as some sort of different goal?
Well, it would fit under our action plan right now, where we have single-family home rental rehab. It would fit under that currently. That's a current program that we have right now.
So that program is probably under the third bullet about affordability, quality, and availability of the housing to preserve our existing housing stock.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
And I know this is a lot of information, but we have to present it. And I know that it kind of gets a little heavy, and some of the data doesn't always click with what we want to hear or see, but it's the data that we have,
Right.
that we're presenting.
I appreciate
And then
that.
we're trying to move forward with getting on the next 5 years. If the next 5 years look just like the 5 years we just went through, then that's the goals we adopt, and we move forward with creating projects that go along with the goals. But the goals and then the projects come. And so we're trying to squeeze this all in the time frame to meet getting this plan submitted to HUD. So normally what we would do tonight, Mayor, is we would sit down and say, from the group, from the public who are here, and I appreciate them coming tonight, what do you think our goals and priorities should be? Should we continue based on the data, addressing the cost burden, addressing the affordability and availability of housing? Then we kind of continue these goals. And I can tell you, from looking at all the goals that we started from 2004 to now, they're all the same. They have not changed. It's about affordability and availability and sustainability of our housing.
Well, part of the challenge is if you only have 500,000 of CDBG and 320,000 of home funds, there's just very little you can do with money like that on any kind of macro level. So we just have to be realistic in what it is that we're stewarding and the impact we can have. We're not going to solve the climate crisis with $500,000, right? It's just not going to happen. But we have to sort of prioritize and find the best projects that we can go after.
Certainly. And, you know, we also have opportunities with rollover dollars that would increase our pot a little bit more, and also the possibility of bringing in program income as we sell houses that increases our pot a little bit more to do bigger or more projects.
Are there two slides, this one and the one that just preceded it for the goals, or are there more goals than this one?
This is just a 5-year goal that we have right now, and this is the one for low and moderate
Right.
income persons, Mayor. And then the program, the consolidated plan says we have to address non-low and moderate income. So that is the second slide, how we're going to address non-low and moderate income persons. And so this is the goal that we have currently now that we're using to address non-low income, moderate income persons versus low and moderate income persons.
Well, it's helpful to have these up here. I'm just wondering if maybe for the first 5 or 10 minutes in the groups, they talk about the first slide and see if they agree or they think something should be changed. And then you go to the second slide for 5 or 10 minutes and evaluate. And that way, it's always, it's for me personally, to start from a was adopted previously.
Right.
It might help everybody say, okay, this makes sense, but maybe this should be tweaked or just leave it alone, essentially. Does that make sense?
Yes, that would work perfectly. And again, I did go through and put all the strategies from all 5 years that we've done to date, but it's increase and expand affordable housing. We've had those for over the years. I put them in the back for everybody to see as well. But the issues that we have in this community has not changed since 2004. We're still tracing that, trying to make that affordability and sustainability happen.
What's the next slide you had?
That goes to 2014 to 2019. Same thing, low and moderate income persons. And then how do we address non-low and moderate income persons? We had a lot more goals in 2014 to 2019. We condensed them in 2019 to 24. We just condensed them. So if you want to come down, we can get our circles going and you can get feedback. We can talk in groups if you want to take notes, because you have pins up for you to pick a circle and write down the concerns. We can start, like you said, Mayor, with our current goals for low and moderate income. If people see anything up here that they want to change or expand, we have the opportunity to gather that information. Sorry.
So you have some facilitators that are going to take.
Yeah, you're the facilitators.
Oh,
Yes.
You're the facilitator.
You haven't done
other
this
duties is assigned apparently.
Everybody's got a circle number, but they can condense them since we have a smaller crowd, but they're already in circles. So you can just pick a circle. That's circle 1.
Oh, no.
This is number 5.
Good thing.
Somebody can take circle 5.
We should have done those referrals beforehand. We should have done the referrals beforehand. Then you could have gone. I don't know if they're going to report back out, but don't write it down.
Oh, thank you for asking. Yes, Elizabeth. Yes, she just had her second baby. Yeah, and she's with our state of Kansas. All right. So, yeah, lots going on. She's doing great. I'll tell her that. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
We got, we've got Corey at 10. Yeah, go home. You've had enough.
Okay, so what we
too
have
hard.
on the screen is our current
Be careful driving.
5-year goals that will be ending in June of this year. And so this is to address our goals for low and moderate income persons. So we're saying we want to utilize and leverage our CDBG home funds through private, nonprofit, and public partnerships, because CDBG by itself isn't enough, to create, sustain, and expand affordable housing for low and moderate income households through increasing the supply of single-family, two-family housing for home ownership, reduce the cost burden for low-income households, and to increase the affordability and quality of available housing for homeowners. So if you agree or disagree with any of those statements for addressing the needs of low and moderate income persons? Or would you like to add to or be more specific? That's the question.
So it's the bullet points that we're discussing.
It's the bullet points, unless you think that the overall, priority goal to utilize our funds needs to change a little bit. But that's pretty broad. It's kind of covering both create, sustain, and expand. But those are kind of say increasing, reduce the cost burden, or increase affordability availability. We want to be general, because if you're not general and you're too specific, then you can't create your programs.
We're doing goals. Vanessa will turn the big difference.
If you have some suggestions, you're always welcome to send those into us or
So you're thinking about the projects to buy a home, what programs we're gonna do. But before we can create a program, we need to know what our priorities are. So for example, if you're thinking climate action, then it's to increase the affordability, quality, and availability of owner housing for homeowners citywide. That would be sustainability. That would be rehab. But you want it broad so that you can come up with a big project, because if you make it too tight, then the project you can do becomes tight. But if it's broad, you can create a lot more programming with it is broad.
Vanessa, are these, ultimately gonna have to be ranked?
No, we don't have to rank them.
What are the things that we can?
Unless you want to rank them. You don't have to.
My observation is, it wasn't sufficient
There's something that you don't see that's listed as a goal that you think should have as a goal.
Appreciate it. There's a lot to go through when there's, and the fact you guys care enough about it to show up, that's awesome, so thank you for coming.
Did you think it was long? You flew by. What? Everybody left. You're down to 13 people. Gotta be a better way to do this, like give them the data beforehand, let them look at it, don't go over it. You can't expect people to be there in an hour and a half.
Okay, fine, I do wonder though, does, if it covers accessibility, accessibility.
Do you have to present it? Do you have to give a more presentation?
I'm not sure.
A public forum?
Yeah.
This is the public forum now. No, I meant take an hour and a half for the data. Summarize it. Okay. You got more? And I think certain these going very well. If you want my opinion, I'm just telling you. Okay, we
Bullet mentions to access or maintain.
Yeah, I agree. Right.
Hello.
Real world
One thing I would be interested in is single family and two family housing is first floor. Maybe have, so like for multi-family families that not serve, that's we need density for the primary purposes and also just not narrowing that down to one, yes, because otherwise they won't have housing on townhomes, and then that's also something that would be more so creative solution to the cost burden. So we know that, you saw right there, when we're talking about increasing the salary, 11 can't build it, this part. And then we're not.
I want to ask about that now bullet, because that's referring to the NERSA, which is that area over by Willis and and I don't even know whether that's still applies.
And they could provide it this year, yes.
It still applies, and so that bullet is specifically about that area which has the bigger subdivision.
And all, since it's track 13, they've broken it up.
She has a 5-month-old.
So
She's working.
does increasing the supply of single family
With
or
still
multi-family housing
500 hours.
or ownership
So even if you're
work
really housing
within
one
that
apartment,
NERSA?
that cost of living is so high.
So you could change the wording of that to be more expansive.
And it is
I
also,
read one where it's-
it can be citywide, including the NRSS. It could be both. But since we created the NRSS, it's called as if you have to do something, and that's what created the area.
Quality is so.
So we just talk about single family or multi-family housing versus two-family.
Right.
Change that one.
And.
I would agree with for everyone.
Yeah.
So there's mine. Let's go ahead and put down, but.
I know, we got money.
But,
Did you give them a new model?
The neighborhoods who are current single family, tracks, they're gonna comply. Because they're trying to maintain,
Where's the other one?
single
I thought you had a
family
whole bunch.
occupied. And so it's, in that area, we have 2 years of dogfighting with the legislature. So we need to incentivize more of that. It's gonna be fight.
What do you think about that option to expand citywide, but still have a specific information to nurses satisfied? The nurses, lower census tract is just a bigger subdivision.
Especially for quality, affordable multi-family, small site. One thing instead of the whole area.
Saying, hey, we have to get so much done in the nursing area, and we're not limiting just in the nursing area.
Yeah, but.
I think
And I think the.
No, I saw that first.
Is proposed, but I'll make sure.
I'll go back to the data.
I will say, I sit up straight.
I thought we heard that actually is added supply, there is, there's a disparity in affordability.
One of the things is our.
Numbers rents are higher
Countywide right now.
than the
But
50%
we are
or even
even
higher.
more
than
older,
those.
but
Added
who
supply.
after down there and out there.
You need to increase supply, maybe it increases supply.
And there's
It's not bad.
refunded.
Oh, that's ownership.
We got them switched out.
So I think that's why bullet 2 is kind of worded the way it is. It's subsidized rent for those who are cost burdened.
Availability of the work.
Especially if it's cost of materials.
Well, it's gonna take care of the cost burden for those houses for rental. So both lines, all ownership,
That is.
and sell it for free too.
Well, how much money do you?
We got 400,000.
Well, so
The majority of
now with what we just did
we
here,
funded out for,
what's the difference between bullet 1
it's for rent assistance, it's rent subsidy. 100,000 to go to the bridge school or help them. We need to have I got nothing, so you're welcome. So,
They're really late.
They're
Right.
Right.
Just expand the first bullet. Why? Or it's one bullet that says affordability, supply, well, maybe availability is supply.
But I think the work in vertical is something, specifying the type of houses. So like, single family housing, and now multi-family housing. So
We've also
it's
got.
just specifying the type of house.
In DC.
So I'm curious. We sort of restrain this conversation by the way we sort of frame this. I want to just capture what bigger things that were important. You came tonight, that's not necessarily about this. You think there are priorities for us to do more that you would like us to hear. It may not necessarily fit a category, but I want to capture if there are things you came with tonight.
I work at the Brown House, so, I mean, I'm doing this and just like interacting with those people.
So,
They're
yeah, about
artists
5 years
and
ago, there's a
creators,
couple of properties that came off.
extra months of rent that I had before we just get into.
Or maybe we would say.
He's like, they're possibly gonna put down for apartments for security. And just, like, just like seeing some of the guys that come over from Bridgestone are like, I have 30 days in Bridgestone. I cannot make enough money in these 30 days to even like think about just some of the despair that I see.
So I don't think we'll wait for us to capture some of those numbers, but that's a really good data point for us. So rental deposit, that's a good thing. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I want to make one comment about, like we're saying, I think there has to be some sort of incentive.
That seems like something that
Down the
road.
that low-income housing, keep low-income or base. When Central Housing Authority to their emergency housing vouchers, they have a program sign a lease with them.
So
And they get $1,000 right away, and then immediately, and then the loan line, we rent to them, there's another smaller incentive. That alone got our client's house.
I'm learning.
Yeah.
This is not my thing at all, right? And I do want to make sure that what we do overall is integrated with our CAP plan.
No, but that's just an
We got that
example.
And one piece that stuck out to me about that is for the first time, utility was something that was showing up as a barrier. And they said in a presentation, they said, this is the first time that's come up as a barrier. My cost utilities is exactly the kind of thing that we're going to try to think about for rehabbing and upgrading.
But I think overall, housing.
Okay, 4 minutes, 2 minutes, then we're gonna switch to the other topic.
So it seemed like keeping you in place of moving people out, I just don't lose those points of.
I mean, I think the first
coherence.
that's articulated.
Increase use of renewables. That's a more expensive form of reform. So it's a good data point, but maybe you're looking at.
No, wait.
Never
mind. That one. This is old.
This is.
Did you have anything else?
This is another.
This is our current, this is our current.
And then what was
The next one is for non.
Especially when it comes to sales and zoning, because I'm sure there's a lot of single family housing. They have problems. They might not even. I have a bedroom in the college. So just looking at the zoning
And
laws.
that's where case management comes in.
Available space, I actually. When it is a single family home, make sure the zoning laws are.
Say, hey,
There's
here's
an old
a
double,
check, do you have your
2 rooms of them.
You know,
They could house for college students.
It's a work.
They're very low, they just having a zoning.
Otherwise, they're just throwing money in the pot.
Make sure that the
3
single
or
family
2
home
minutes left.
impacted
Is
by-
there anything else we want?
Okay, we're gonna switch to non-low income
Oh,
persons.
you got a suggestion on making changes to allow more flexibility on boomers?
That we want to add.
Do we have any barriers right now?
Create
Like an elderly couple
and
that would have a room available?
I'm just talking, that's.
You have one, whether they're a caretaker or something rent without licensing it as a rental.
Practical matter, the work
License your home as a rental.
You want to be
then
able to
you're
show results.
gonna be on the same
Remember,
occupancy.
the point, something, we only
Restrictions
got
than
$2
anybody
million
else,
to work with.
whether it's partially or
You got your house.
And you have to physically modify the house.
But what's happening now is nobody sees it.
Nothing's happening. in many of our cities, that's a big step.
It's a huge step. Even like, and I'm sure there's tons of,
You can get.
like, same, like, couples, houses around campus, with like 2-3 bedrooms, that they could be enticing, opening up to students and lower that barrier of entry to housing. And like, maybe make it, maybe that easy access, people who have rooms available, like making that available.
I know this might not be a topic for non-low income persons, but I think we have to still come up with how we're going to address non-low income households. So normally we have looked at, again, trying to do mixed income housing that includes both low and non-low income households. Remove blighted housing in non-low income neighborhoods or census tracts, support and address code enforcement of deteriorated housing, and remove housing from floodplains and other areas. That's how we've addressed non-low income persons. It's not necessarily persons as much as we looked at areas. So when we go into a non-low income census tract and we find a blighted structure and we tear it down, we can then turn around and use it for affordable housing, but it was under a non-low income category. Same thing when we take housing out of floodplains, we're not going to put that back. But just like at Baker subdivision, we're doing that mixed use of both affordable housing, market rate housing, and low income housing as far as units. So we still have to kind of address, it's not necessarily low income persons as much as it is kind of an area that we can look at to say, how can we be outside of a census tract and use it to accommodate both low income and non-low income by doing mixed housing. Does that make sense?
Is it the habitat, so it's habitat houses, for example?
Some of those are on.
Yeah.
You turn around and convert it into, but you start off. But you can say, hey, we went into the census tract.
What I understand. Anyone who becomes homeless right now, they have 30 days. But if they have.
So sorry, I really want to raise transportation. I mean, I don't know, I don't feel like, it feels like the fast food. Yeah, so that's part of this.
So again.
I keep trying to listen, I don't hear
something. For this group also, is it about creating, sustaining, and?
I mean, you don't have a large. I feel like we have for a college student. My understanding is that college students will have more homeless just because of more resources. That for college students, we also, these people tend to tap into those. So we might have another town, 60,000 people.
I don't know that. I really don't.
Yeah. I think that is good, but also we can lower the deposit cap that keeps people out of housing. That could also just be another way to solve this issue.
That's a challenge in these, we have private home properties.
I do think that.
Is that?
Yeah, that's true.
So that's why I think that's.
Yeah, I mean, we need more of that, just a factor.
So I would have.
And they show 7%. So they can see 9% now, and they can see. So it's just, I think they really. That was.
Maybe this is where I would actually like.
Talking to some. They say they're 2%.
Improve the energy.
Maybe it depends upon who they are, what they're charging.
And I'm sure like. I'm sure like a lot of housing too, like set aside systems. So.
Especially you have like 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 3 bathrooms, 4 bathrooms. Then they bring in a little. It's really more like,
Right.
I have a question. Go ahead.
Just like the slum.
Apartment complex.
Are there any fund actions goals that are addressing building codes?
Really knows the inefficient now because of our concern for.
Like specifically?
Okay. I'm gonna throw this out to you guys to think about too. For our CDBG funds, 70% of our dollars have to go to LMI in that 1 to 3 year period. Which means 30% can go to non-LMI. So if we use it for slum and blight, or we use it for housing rehab for those people who are over the 80%, as long as we don't use more than 30% of our funds, we can do rehab for that higher income level. Now, we can still cap it to say, okay, we'll go up to 100% rather than going up to 150%, so that you capture those just above the max on HUD, but not people who can afford to really fix their house like what they have.
That's
And then it's like an actual conversation or not.
No, just like this.
We need to open that up for that non-LMI, just for that.
We've got bullet points for LMI that
Because I've asked.
act as an umbrella. Those same bullet points are not up here, right? So for example, increase the affordability, quality, and availability of owner housing for non-LMI.
Oh, see, that's the point. It's not even out for a bid.
The
So I
quality
know there's not somebody out there.
is what could be addressed for the climate action plan.
You say increase sustainability.
Sustainability, yeah, okay, so increase the sustainability of
Housing for non-low income
So,
households.
we agree, create, sustain, expand here too. And we can add that, if not, there's some other goals.
Sustainability, affordability, accessibility, all those kind of abilities.
You're very valuable source of information. So when people handle a mental house, where do they go? Do they find typically rental house on the top of the rental house?
So, we don't house anyone in the rental house anymore. We more, so, Bridge Home is closed from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. So we're trying to fill that gap. That's what we're doing. But we're also like helping people find housing. So we asked a lot of our volunteers and donors, like, they have an open building. And like this person has built a relationship with us and they seem very trustworthy enough to like ask someone to house them. So, and that's a lot of our transitional housing. So like finding people with rooms, let them stay there, and connecting people who we trust to like ask to live in those homes. And so a lot of the people that we help house, people originally kicked out, had nowhere to go, and called someone and said, "Do you have a builder services like on the street?" We give them a house.
That's beautiful. We appreciate the work you're doing. That we can't do that now. Available housing actually, so that's terrific.
And there's no rent there, so I don't know. Yeah, that's our big thing. Is I think we have like 10 people in housing like that.
We got 4 minutes.
Another thing that comes to mind here.
That's a big thing for
We start talking about the west side of
a lot
town.
of times.
So
There's a lot of
plumbers
training.
don't walk that way.
You come up from Des Moines, go back to Des Moines.
Mobile homes now are selling for $80,000 to $100,000, which is now this, the low income. It's moderate income to qualify for those.
Is there anything else?
Who is city considered expanding the hub? The conversion homes out there.
I don't think you can.
Any other questions?
You can use budgets for non.
But with that, realistically, we did, what we have available, and rental's so limited that you can only do one or two.
So I would tell you that
Okay, well,
So traditional mobile
So,
Right.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
maybe
it's- it seems like a really reasonable.
some of the,
And get a little bit,
like,
there's a lot of big
cottage,
percentage.
lot,
And the 8%. My comment is just, how are we, not that I'm trying to prioritize, but it's just like, I mean, next 5 years.
It's on our-
You know, and focus on, they can get to that next, or.
I think that's the.
Yeah, is there a way, I mean, I think the comment
It's
is,
the reducing
look,
of the
you can only
cost.
do a very limited
So
amount.
the.
And getting back to
Yeah,
whether the results that you want to
access.
show for this, I
Yeah.
would say select one or two.
But I mean, it's been that way for like
20 years, like.
yeah, because it doesn't mean you can't have a lot of programs. If you make the goals broad enough, you can find programs to go.
I don't know.
And like, could we, do more outreach to the rental, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's my comment, that you're asking for my reaction to this list to be like, kind of.
Section 8,
You know, then I bet,
You
know, some strings attached, you're always getting that check from the government every month. Whereas, you know, it ups the renters is.
Okay.
The whole neighborhood.
We do our
The houses that need to. Yeah, it makes a big impact.
You do the combination, it just gives you some.
Yeah, a lot of people drop off on the rural, providers.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you say we're falling under that.
Working in the land services that we saw, so like.
Remember 30% of your CDBG funds.
But I mean, is that?
I
I would not say that.
No.
I would
But
say
I mean, so
that
then
I would agree.
see them better incentives. So what are those better incentives?
It's not gonna impact a lot of people at
Yeah.
30%.
So we're doing this on annual basis, right? So maybe-
Always welcome to have this conversation and have, you know, so.
Yeah, but the impact you're gonna have is gonna be minimal, 30% of the.
Okay, we can wrap up.
Provide some perspective.
We're gonna actually get higher points on this on the,
Okay, I just want to share with everybody what our next steps are. After we do the plans and priorities for tonight, then we're going to do a public forum on our action plan projects, because this year we do the 5-year plan and we do the action plan. And then we're going to bring that feedback back to council, hopefully in March. And then we're going to prepare both the consolidated and the action plans, hopefully April and May, and these are not permanent dates. And then we have to put everything out for a 30 comment period, have a public hearing, and then submit it to HUD. So look for a opportunity to come to the public forum to talk about actual action plan projects. To give your input on that. Because hopefully we have some goals. From this feedback, council will decide on the final goals. And then once we know that, then we can bring back some project ideas that kind of fit with those goals. And remember, just because we did it tonight, you can always change it. You can always go back and update your plan. It's not in concrete. You can always go back. You just have to go out and do a public comment period again and all of that. But you're never stuck with just any goals. You can always adjust accordingly. You just have to go through a public process. So if you think this is the magic answer and it's not, it's okay. We update our plan as much as we can because things change and we want to change according to what the needs are. But
I know this was a long, heavy night of data. We appreciate it. We still have a lot of data to collect. That's just part of the consolidated plan. We're just beginning to look at it and, but thank you for your comments, your feedback. I really appreciate it. Thank you, council and Steve, for your support, and Kelly and everybody who's talking around. Deb, Nora, Amy, thank you so much.
All right. Anything else from us tonight, Vanessa? You're good. All right, council, we have to, a couple more items to take care of business before we adjourn.
Got one good. It's like little townhomes or something. More density. It's 3 different caves. Little hobbit homes.
Having too much fun talking. Love the public. We're close.
You don't have to know. I was trying to write down the name of people.
All right, we're going to go ahead. We got a few more items on our agenda we have to talk about. So if you want to, thank you for coming. And if you want to continue the conversation, I would invite you to either step outside or just wait for a few minutes, and then you can continue and stay in here. So, all right, we're going to move on to disposition of communication to council. We have 2 items tonight on the to council. One is an email from Cheryl Alcott regarding utility bill drop-off box request. Is there any inclination to refer to staff or just respond that it will stay where it's at?
So we haven't had this configuration, in my opinion, very long. I'm not sure that this is the right configuration forever, but I guess I'd like to see us try this a bit longer and see what happens. People are used to it in a certain way, and I don't know. I don't feel a huge need to change it right away.
Is there a motion?
I'm
just respond.
Yeah, move that we respond and acknowledge receiving it.
And just that we're going to leave it the way it is for a while.
At least for a while to just get a better sense of usage.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Secondly, we have an email from the Ames Golden K Kiwanis Club, who came to the meeting just to hear what council decides to do, and they was chatting with them that they learned a lot about the different programs available. So they're asking for consideration for the trailer that they have placed on a piece of property. Would council be so inclined to either ask for at least for a memo or place it on a future agenda?
I would move that we get a memo on it, because I'm not sure I understand
Yep.
what the dynamics are.
Second. All right. Those in favor of the motion for asking for a memo from staff, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so Jeff and company will do is staff will look at this, write up a report. It'll come back to council. Again, under disposition communication, council with more information. And then if council decides they want to put on an agenda to discuss maybe changing something or take consideration, then they'll go on to into an agenda, and then public comment will be invited essentially. If you want to continue to follow up with emails, that's certainly advisable. And we just want to thank you. I mean, they indicate they've donated over $35,000 to local needs for, I think it's particular for children in the community in the Ames. And so I think it'd be good just to get staff's perspective and background. And I think they'll make sure you get a copy of the memo too when it comes out. So,
And Mayor, I just am not clear what action needs to be taken to not have action taken. Yeah, that was confusing, wasn't it? Since staff is now aware of it, is this issue now on hold until council learns about it and is able to decide on what action to take?
Oh, as far as us taking any action against,
Yes, because it seems like there shouldn't be any action taken until council has a chance to review.
I did talk to Jeff about that, and he said he was told that by staff that if it's being considered in the process, it can stay as is until a decision is made then.
It's good.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. And we'll make sure that you get a copy of the memo when it comes out. So, all right. Thank you. All right. Council comments. Amber, we'll start with you. Any comments tonight?
She's still there.
Nothing for me.
Thank you. Rowan?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Nothing tonight.
So for the masses that are watching, just assume they're masses. I just want to promote a little bit tonight. We try to promote city activities. Parks and Rec Department has come out with their spring fitness and wellness guide. Encourage people to consider checking that out to see if there are opportunities that would fit what you're looking for. The city has fantastic programming for Parks and Rec. My family has benefited tremendously through this, and I always look forward to seeing if there's something that I can participate in. So to encourage people to take a look at that. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Mayor, have you received enough applications for boards and commissions?
Never.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a few that we're still short on.
I don't know which those are, but it seems like people should continue to consider boards and commissions as if there were a rolling deadline and just put their applications in for the next time there's an opening.
Thank you. And there's also it's been a social media push on a couple of them that have unique qualifications that need to be met. So anyway.
That's all.
All right. Thank you. With that, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.